We are living, we are dwelling in a grand and awful time, in an age on ages telling, to be living is sublime. Hark, the waking up of nations, Gog and Magog to the fray. Hark, what soundeth is creation, groaning for her latter day.
Today is the Sabbath day, and we will be continuing where we left off last week with our study, The Stone the Builders Rejected. And some of you had questions, and we were not able to entertain those questions last week, so I decided to continue this study today so that we can accommodate some of the questions some of you had. Before I open up the floor to entertain your questions regarding the stone the builders rejected, and this will be part 2, questions and answers, let me read a statement here for you, and it's taken from Testimonies, Volume 5, page 706 and 707. It says, "The fact that there is no controversy or agitation among God's people should not be regarded as conclusive evidence that they are holding fast the sound doctrine. There is reason to fear that they may not be clearly discerning between truth and error. When no questions are started by investigation of the scripture, when no differences of opinion arises which will set men searching the Bible for themselves to make sure that they have the truth, there will be many now, as in ancient times, who will hold to tradition and worship they know not what." And I think this is one of the things which we discovered last week when we were studying the stone that the builders rejected. And we discovered that that stone is not a representation of the second coming of Christ. That stone is not Jesus Christ. But the stone is simply a part of the mountain from which it was cut out. And in order to identify the nature of that stone, we had to identify the nature of the mountain, because the mountain was the context or the environment of that stone. So if we can discover, or as we discovered last week, that the mountain is a representation of God's people, His church. In fact, that's the last church that will be in existence, is the last true church. And when I say the last true church, I mean the last professed true church of God that will be in existence at the time when the 10 kings are in existence. And we know that that last professed true church is the Seventh-day Adventist Church. And we found that in Daniel chapter 9 and verse 16 through 20. We also found the meaning of that mountain in Joel chapter 2, verse 1. "Blow ye the trumpet in Zion, sound an alarm in my holy mountain." We can also find that in Isaiah chapter 2 and verse 2 there, where it says, "In the last days the mountain of the Lord's house shall be established in the top of the mountains, and many nations shall flow unto it." And many other places in the Bible, it shows you that a mountain, or the mountain, symbolizes the church of God. And so we see then that the mountain, Daniel was praying for this mountain. You find that in Daniel chapter 9 there, and verse 16 through 20. He was praying for that mountain, or for God's people. And the fact that he was praying for the mountain, it shows you that the mountain was not a literal mountain he was praying for, but he was praying for God's people. So we know then that the mountain is not just God's church, but it represents the people that comprise God's church. Hence, if the mountain represents people, it means therefore the stone is simply a small portion of the corporate mountain or the corporate church. We also discovered that anciently, when David slew Goliath, when he took that stone from his shepherd's bag, that David represents Christ, who will take from his shepherd's bag as the good shepherd, as we find that in John chapter 10 there, from his shepherd's bag. So we see therefore that ancient David, the shepherd boy, who had this shepherd's bag, and from it he took one of 5 stones that he had in it, and he threw that stone with his sling, and he hit Goliath, and Goliath came crashing down. Similarly, when Christ reaches into his shepherd's bag, the Bible, he will find a people who will be that compacted stone in Daniel 2, and he will swing that stone. We discovered it's the 144,000, and it's the 144,000 who will bring that image of Daniel chapter 2 crashing down, as David did anciently in type when he brought Goliath crashing down. We see also that that stone represents a kingdom that he promised to set up in the days of those 10 kings, not after they are destroyed, but while they are in existence. In the days or during their days, he will set up a kingdom. And it, that is the stone or the people who he will cut out from the mountain, and he will have them together as a compacted stone, as a kingdom, where he will be king, as how David was the one who was in charge of that stone in his shepherd's bag. Christ, antitypical David, will be king. In the days of these kings, Christ himself will set up that kingdom, and it shall break and consume all those kingdoms represented by that image of Daniel 2 in the toes there. And it, that's the kingdom or the stone or the people from that mountain shall stand forever. And it says the stone will grow and become a great mountain and fill the whole earth. And that is a representation of the work that those 144,000 people, those stone people, will do for Christ in bringing converts into his church. The church will grow, and a great multitude of souls will be gathered in. So I will open up the floor now for some of your questions, because I'm sure you will have questions. Because this has been a teaching of the church for years, that this stone represents the second coming of Christ. So here now we see that the Bible clearly shows you that it cannot be the second coming of Christ. And this will obviously put a different perspective all entirely on the final work of the gospel. For it says that the gospel of this kingdom, that stone kingdom, the gospel of that kingdom shall be preached unto all the world, and then Christ will come. Not before. Then he will come in what we normally call the second coming. That stone kingdom must be set up and be a witness, and then shall Christ come a second time. So I will entertain your questions now. I think Derek, Sister William, you had a question for us. What is it?
You mentioned that the stone in Daniel 2 is not Christ, but 144,000. Is this a literal number?
The 144,000, now that's a study in itself, but the 144,000, it is a literal number. Contrary to what the church teaches, it is not a symbolic number. If you turn there to Revelation chapter 7, it brings it out very clearly, because it shows you, first of all, it says, and after these things I saw 4 angels standing on the 4 corners of the earth. And in verse 3 it says, saying, hurt not the earth. And this other angel came from the east, saying, hurt not the earth, neither the sea nor the trees, till we have sealed the servants of God in their foreheads. And I heard the number of them which were sealed, and there was sealed 144,000 of all the tribes of the children of Israel. Now, come on. John clearly states here that he was not deaf. John clearly states here that he heard it with his own ears, that it was 144,000 people who were sealed from all the tribes of the children of Israel. And he goes on here to delineate the 12 tribes from which they were sealed. And he said from the tribe of Judah, they were sealed 12,000. From Reuben, 12,000. From Gad, 12,000. From Asa, 12,000. From Naphtali, 12,000, and so on, right down to Benjamin, the youngest of the tribes, 12,000. So now he goes on, 12 plus 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 12. 12 times 12, 144. Now some people say, well, it's because the book of Revelation is symbolic. Well, it would seem as though everything in Revelation is symbolic. That is not so at all. If the 144,000, if that's symbolic, do you believe that the 7 last plagues will be symbolic, or will there be 7 last plagues? I mean, we can decide to chop the book of Revelation up and make everything symbolic. But we have to look at the context. We all believe that the 7 last plagues will be literally 7 last plagues. No, it will not be symbolic of 144 plagues. You see? The other thing is, if you notice carefully that after John saw the 144,000, in contrast to the number that could have been numbered, that he heard and that he could have counted, it says there in verse 9, after this, after that number which I heard, he said, I beheld. He said, I saw now. So he heard 144,000, and then he said, I beheld. After that, after I heard the 144,000 sealed, he said, a great multitude which no man could number. So in contrast to those who could have been numbered, he saw another group who could not have been numbered. And now this is what Daniel chapter 2 brings out. It shows you the stone that came from the mountain. God rejected that mountain, and the only good thing that he can get from that mountain is a small stone. And when he gets that stone, he is going to use that stone to call a great multitude of people into a purified church. And those people who are added to that 144,000, that stone, it will grow and grow and grow until it becomes a great mountain, until it fills the whole earth. And that is the great multitude that John is showing you here. Alright, that is how the gospel is going to finish. So the idea that the 144,000 is a symbolic number is not founded on the word of God. It is error. It is not true. There is no basis for it in the Bible. The 144,000 is the antitype of the 120 disciples on the day of Pentecost, upon whom the latter rain fell. So that 120 was a type of the 144,000. And the 3,000 souls who were converted in one day by the 120 upon whom was the Spirit, that also is a type of the great multitude who will be brought in by the 144,000 upon whom the Holy Spirit again will fall. See? So in the time of Christ, the stone was 120. Right? And the stone that grew represented the 3,000 who were added to the church in that day. Okay? And the same thing is going to happen in our time. Early writings, page 15, also shows you that it is a literal number. Also on page 15. Also, if you notice carefully in John, there is in Review and Herald, recent review was April 1987, April 3rd, 1987. There was an article there in which Beatrice Neal stated the church's new position. By the way, the idea that the 144,000 is literal was a teaching of the church as early as 1927. You can look at that article, Signs of the Times, May 3rd, 1927, right, in which they taught that the 144,000 will be literal, and they are the ones who will be preaching the loud cry message and bringing in the great multitude. You can go and look that up also. However, in 1917, when the population of the church had passed. Now, this is where the whole thing started, you know. This is where the whole thing started. It was really in 1917 when the population of the church passed 144,000. They became confused. See? Because at that time, they were teaching that it will only be, well, this was another one again. At one time, they used to teach it will only be 144,000 who will be alive when Christ comes. That was really the teaching that they had. Alright? Then they came to the position where they taught that it will be 144,000 who will bring the great multitude in. You see? It was so that 1917 was the turning point when the population of or the membership, I should say, of the church passed or exceeded 144,000. And this spurious teaching started to find its way into our publication. That it's a symbolic number. So therefore it doesn't really matter whether you are in the 144,000 or not. It simply means that it's symbolic of the great multitude. This is what Beatrice Neal says in that review, Herald, that review article in 1987. And she tried to make Ellen White say that it's symbolic also. It's amazing what people can do with Ellen White's writing to make it say what it doesn't say. And here it is. She was trying to show that the article went on to say, for the church that was so small in around 1844, to think of, they could not conceive, and I'm simply paraphrasing it now, they could not conceive of a great multitude being saved. But now, for a church whose membership is over 7 million, we can't conceive of only 144,000 people being saved from the Seventh-day Adventist Church. So therefore, they had to concoct something to make people feel comfortable. That it's not really 144,000. You know, relax. It will be more than that. But Ellen White tells us, she said that we should strive with all the power God has given us to be among the 144,000. And she says strive. Why will she say strive to be in the number if it doesn't matter? If the number is symbolic of being the great multitude, well, it doesn't make sense. Why will you strive to be in the great multitude when the great multitude will be such a large number? It doesn't really matter. Okay, another point I wanted to bring out here to show you that it's not a literal number. You will notice in Revelation chapter 14, John says here that I looked, and lo, a lamb stood on Mount Zion, and with him 144,000 having his father's name written in their foreheads. Now tell me, this 144,000, they are standing with the Lamb, the King, Christ, on Mount Zion, and in their foreheads is his father's name. And also in verse 4 it says, the last part, it says, these were redeemed from among men, being the first fruits unto God, unto the Lamb. So now the 144,000, as we showed you in Revelation chapter 7, they are only the first fruits. This is why John said, I heard 144,000, and then after that first fruit, after that first set, then I saw a great multitude, the second fruits. So the 144,000 is only the first increment of the final harvest. The 144,000 is the ones who are reaped from the mountain first. They are called the first fruits of the final harvest. And after they are reaped from the mountain, they are then used as harvesters to call the second fruits, the great multitude, into God's purified church. So there again, it shows you that 144,000, it is not a symbolic number, it is a literal number, just as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 12 apostles, 120 disciples, 144,000 saviors, according to Obadiah 21. Next question, please.
What will happen to the rest of the mountain after the stone has been cut out? And what does the term cut out mean?
The term cut out simply means it's another way of saying the church will be purified. Okay? The church will be purified. For example, if you turn to the book of Leviticus, chapter 27 there, Leviticus chapter 27, I hope I'm correct. It says, not 27, what's that? Verse 13? No. Leviticus chapter, let's see, 23. Yes, chapter 23, yes. It says there, in concerning the Day of Atonement, it says also, verse 27, chapter 23 and verse 27, also, on the 10th day of the 7th month, there shall be a day of atonement. It shall be an holy convocation unto you, and ye shall afflict your souls and offer an offering made by fire unto the Lord. And ye shall do no work in that same day, for it is a day of atonement, to make an atonement for you before the Lord your God. For whatsoever soul it be that shall not be afflicted in that same day, he shall be cut off from among his people. So the cutting out of the mountain is a day of atonement experience for God's people. It's a day of judgment. It's the day of purification, just like in the time of ancient Israel. It will be literally people who will die. This is talking about a purification. This is talking about dead people. This is God's judgment. This is God's justice we are dealing with here. Right? Those who are trampling upon his law. Those who profess to keep his law, but are trampling upon it. This is brought to view in Ezekiel chapter 9, in which it tells you there that 6 men or 5 men with slaughtering weapons, or 6 men really, or 6 angels with slaughtering weapons, were commanded by Christ to visit his people in judgment for committing the abominations which were specified in Ezekiel chapter 8. And we find that judgment being executed there in Ezekiel chapter 9, where they were told to go through the midst of the city, through the midst of Jerusalem, and set a mark upon the foreheads of the men that sigh and that cry for all the abominations. In fact, I can read that for you from Testimonies to Ministers, page 445. Hear what it says here. Those that overcome the world, the flesh, and the devil will be the favored ones who shall receive the seal of the living God. Those whose hands are not clean, whose hearts are not pure, will not have the seal of the living God. Those who are planning sin and acting it will be passed by. Only those who in their attitude before God are filling the position of those who are repenting and confessing their sins, hear this, in the great antitypical day of atonement, notice that carefully, will be recognized and marked as worthy of God's protection. So now we are in the great antitypical day of atonement. So if you are not afflicting your souls on this great antitypical day of atonement, you will be passed by with the angel who has the right of inkhorn, who is doing the marking. And she goes on here, she says, this sealing of the servants of God is the same that was shown to Ezekiel in vision. Now she was referring here to the sealing that was brought forth in Revelation chapter 7, where this angel was seen ascending from the east, having the seal of the living God, and John heard 144,000 people sealed. And she says, this sealing of the servants of God is the same that was shown to Ezekiel in vision. John also was a witness of this most startling revelation. So the sealing that John saw is the same that Ezekiel saw, the one that we find in Ezekiel chapter 9, and we can probably just read that very quickly there. It says in Ezekiel chapter 9, after he listed the abominations, it says there he cried, also in mine ears with a loud voice, saying, cause them that have charge over the city to draw near, even every man with a sword-destroying weapon in his hand. And behold, 6 men came from the way of the higher gate, which lieth toward the north, and every man a slaughter weapon in his hand. And one man among them was clothed with linen, which with a writer's inkhorn by his side. And they went in and stood beside the brazen altar. And the glory of the God of Israel was gone up from the cherub, whereupon he was, to the threshold of the house. And he called to the man clothed with linen, which had the writer's inkhorn by his side. So bear in mind that this man with the writer's inkhorn by his side, who is doing the marking, this is the same angel that John in Revelation chapter 7 is now seeing coming from the east with the seal of the living God to seal the 144,000. And this is why she says the vision that Ezekiel saw is the same that John saw. So both John and Ezekiel saw the sealing of the 144,000. See? And notice carefully that these people are being sealed and marked in God's church in the house, in his house. It says, and the Lord said unto him, go through the midst of the city, through the midst of Jerusalem, and set a mark upon the foreheads of the men that sigh and that cry for all the abominations that be done in the midst thereof. Unto the others he said in mine hearing, go ye after him through the city and smite. Let not your eyes spare, neither have ye pity. Slay utterly old and young. And this is what the cutting out means. To slay utterly old and young. In the time of ancient Israel, they used to just drop dead. An angel of death used to pass by and slay them. How that was done, I don't know. At the time of the Garden of Eden, there was a flaming sword that God gave to the angels to protect the garden from Adam and Eve entering. So whether it was a flaming sword that cut the people down in the time of ancient Israel when they did not afflict their souls, I don't know. Whether God chose for every one of them to have a massive heart attack at the same time, I don't know. But however, it was the work of angels who accomplished that work. And we see here, verse 5 says, and to the others he said in mine hearing, go ye after him through the city and smite, not let your eyes spare, neither have ye pity. Slay utterly old and young, both maids and little children and women, and come not near any man upon whom is the mark, and begin at my sanctuary. So now the beginning of this judgment is at a sanctuary, because it's what 1 Peter chapter 4 and verse 17 says. Judgment begins at the house of God. It only begins there, but it ends in the world. So while we find in Ezekiel chapter 9, we see 6 angels. When judgment is falling upon the world, we see 7, showing you it's complete. The number 6 represents incompleteness. See, God created the world in 6 days, and he rested on the 7th day. You see? So 6 is the number of incompletion. And he created the Sabbath. He made the Sabbath. He finished his work on the 7th day. So the same thing here. Judgment will begin with 6 angels in God's church, but it will be finished with 7 angels pouring out 7 last plagues in the world. So there again we see that this sealing of the 144,000 is in God's church. This sealing of the 144,000 takes place within that mountain. And it is the slaying or the execution of a judgment that results in the cutting out of that stone. What it simply means is that this mountain will be rejected. It will be dirt. The wind will carry them away, as it were. And the stone will remain strong. And God will use that stone as his battle axe and weapon of war, as he says there in Jeremiah chapter 51 and verse 20. Next question, please.
Did you see the Revelation 9:35? It says that the stone grew and became a great mountain.
Elaborate on Daniel chapter 2 and verse 35, in which it says here that the stone grew and became a great mountain. I think I touched on that already, but perhaps if we just read the verse, it says there in Daniel chapter 2 and I'll read from verse 34 where it says, thou sawest still that a stone was cut out without hands, which smote the image on his feet that were of iron and clay, and brake them in pieces. Then was the iron, the clay, the brass, the silver, the gold, broken to pieces together, and became like the chaff of the summer threshing floors. And the wind carried them away, and that no place was found for them. And the stone that smote the image became a great mountain and filled the whole earth. Now, if you notice carefully that one mountain was rejected, that is the mountain that the stone came from, and then the stone that remained now grew and became another mountain. Very important. So we see here that the stone growing and becoming a great mountain, it shows you that the church, or the message of the loud cry, by whom the stone, which the stone will be preaching, it's the 144,000, that stone will be preaching the message of the loud cry. They will be going out into the world saying, come out of her, my people, calling the true people who are still in Babylon, calling them out now. And they will comprise God's true church. And so souls will be added daily unto the church, as it was in the days of the apostles, where it says, and many were added to the church in that day, in the time of the apostles. Same thing will happen here. Many will be added to this stone, and it will grow and grow and grow until it fills the whole earth, until all God's true people are gathered together and they become one purified mountain again. So the growing of that stone is symbolic of the loud cry message, and you can find that in the book of Isaiah, chapter 66. It shows you that this purification that we just talked about, the cutting out, is also brought to view in Isaiah chapter 66. And again, this is another text of scripture that most Seventh-day Adventists think represents the second coming of Christ, but it does not represent the second coming of Christ. This is a parallel text to the one that we read in Ezekiel chapter 9. For it says, for behold, the Lord will come with fire, and with his chariots like a whirlwind, to render his anger with fury, and his rebuke with flames of fire. For by fire and by his sword will the Lord plead with all flesh, and the slain of the Lord shall be many. So there will be a slaying, there will be a cutting out, there will be a purification. And now let us see what happens after the slaying. Because bear in mind, if we can show that this is during probationary time, it will show you clearly that this cannot be the second coming of Christ. And this is exactly what it says. In verse 17 it says, they that sanctify themselves and purify themselves in the garden behind one tree in the midst, eating swine's flesh, and the abomination and the mouse shall be consumed together, saith the Lord. For I know their works and their thoughts. It shall come that I will gather all nations and tongues, and they shall come and see my glory. And I will set a sign among them. Among whom? I will set a sign among those that escape, and send those that escape unto the nations. Now, what did they escape from? They escaped from the slaying that was brought to view in verse 16. For by fire and by his sword will the Lord plead with all flesh, and the slain of the Lord shall be many. And verse 19 says, and I will set a sign among them, and will send those that escape unto the nations. So this can't be the second coming of Christ. These here are people who are doing missionary work, going unto the nations, to Tarshish, to Pul, to Lud, that draw the bow, to Javan, to the isles afar off, that have not heard my fame, neither have seen my glory. And they, that's the escaped ones, that's the stone, shall declare my glory among the Gentiles. And this is what they will be saying, fear God and give glory to him, for the hour of his judgment is come. So now judgment fell upon the church. The slain of the Lord were many. Now they are going out now and say, fear God and give glory to him, for the hour of his judgment has now come for you. And it says there, and look at the work now, and this ties in with that question you asked regarding the growing of the church, or the growing of the stone, or the mountain, the growing of the mountain, or the stone growing and becoming a great mountain. Look what it says. And they shall bring all your brethren for an offering unto the Lord, out of all nations, upon horses and in chariots and in litters and upon mules and upon swift beasts, to my holy mountain, Jerusalem, saith the Lord. And the children of Israel, as the children of Israel bring an offering in a clean vessel into the house of the Lord, so they shall bring them into his holy mountain, Jerusalem. So that is what explains the stone becoming a great mountain and filling the whole earth. And in fact, Daniel chapter 7, and just to cap off on that question there, Daniel chapter 7 even shows you that this kingdom that is going to be established, it says in Daniel chapter 7 and verse 27, verse 26, and the judgment shall sit, and they shall take away his dominion. That is the dominion of the papacy. That is the dominion of the little horn, to consume and to destroy it unto the end. And the kingdom, that is the kingdom that shall be set up. That is this kingdom in Daniel chapter 2, that shall be set up in the days of these kings. And the kingdom. So this kingdom is brought to view here in Daniel chapter 7. But the judgment shall sit, and they shall take away his dominion to consume and to destroy it unto the end. And the kingdom and the dominion and the greatness of the kingdom under the whole heaven shall be given to the people of the saints of the Most High, whose kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and all dominions shall serve and obey him. Now think of it, this is the same kingdom that we discovered in Daniel chapter 2. And this kingdom, he said, shall be, and the kingdom and the dominion and the greatness of the kingdom under the whole heaven. Now this is not up in heaven now. This is under heaven. This is talking about on the earth. In the days of these kings shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom on this earth, before Christ comes the second time, or what we normally call the second time. And this kingdom shall be under the whole heaven, not up in heaven for 1,000 years. Yes, we will spend 1,000 years in heaven. We will reign with Christ for 1,000 years in heaven. But before that time comes, before he comes a second time to take us to heaven, the Bible says that he will establish a kingdom that is represented by that stone in Daniel chapter 2, under the whole heaven. And this stone will grow and grow and grow until it fills the whole earth under the heaven. And the dominion and the greatness and the kingdom under the whole heaven shall be given to the saints of the people of the saints of the Most High, whose kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and all dominion shall serve and obey him. Amen.
Christian, rouse and arm for conflict, nerve thee for the battlefield. Bear the helmet of salvation and the mighty gospel shield. Let the breastplate peace be on thee, take the Spirit's sword in hand. Boldly, fearlessly go forth then, in Jehovah's strength to stand.